Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Hazezon Tamar, yes, one of the OG Legends commanders, really long time ago. So Hazezon is a 7-mana Naya creature, he's a 2/4, and he says, when he enters the battlefield, you create X 1/1 Sand Warrior creature tokens that are red, green, and white at the beginning of your next upkeep, where X is the number of lands you control at that time, and when he leaves the battlefield, you exile all the Sand Warriors. So, a couple of things here. The creature tokens are delayed, so the turn that Hazezon enters the battlefield, you don't actually get the tokens yet. Meaning that if we have Hazezon leave at this point, so we sack it or whatever, this leaves the battlefield trigger will go off, and then next turn on the upkeep will then make the Sand Warrior token. So that is a way of getting around him exiling the Sand Warriors. It's also worth noting that this is just a lot of tokens to get based on our land count, and that they are also all colors instead of just maybe only one color. It's also the number of lands at that time, so if you somehow have more lands on your next turn, like somehow you played like an instant speed ramp spell that put a land into play, you will get more, but that's unlikely. The main thing here is we just want as much ramp that puts additional lands onto the battlefield as possible, and then we are going to use these tokens in a beatdown strategy. So we have Avenger of Zendikar, which also generates a ton of tokens. It's basically another Hazezon Tamar in the main. We've got some big pumps, Beastmaster Ascension, Cathar's Crusade. Remember, if this is on the battlefield when this goes off, assuming we have got like 6 to 7 lands, our creatures are going to get real big. Craterhoof Behemoth. We've got Divine Visitation to turn all of those tokens into 4/4 flyers. Jetmir, which gives various different pumps and abilities based on however many creatures we have. And it is very possible that with Jetmir plus Hazezon trigger, we can have up to 9 creatures to get all of the abilities. Moonshaker Cavalry, the white Craterhoof. Shared Animosity, so all the creatures get pumped for each creature that shares a type with it. Obviously, these are all Sand Warriors. And Porphyros as a way to, when all of these hit the board, boom, that's a ton of damage to our opponents. And there's obviously other beatdown spells that we could have played here, like Coat of Arms could have been in this deck as well. Ultimately, I had to put the cutoff somewhere. I felt like this was enough beatdown cards and that these represented the best of them. We've got a little bit of card draw with special attention paid to Toski and Skullclamp, which obviously work very well with our commander. Then we've got these cards, and while they are labeled as combo, these are more synergy cards. These are basically cards that double up the number of tokens that we get in essence. So Anointed Procession, Mondrak, and Parallel Lives obviously do this. Also, Panharmonicon doubles the trigger on Hazezon, as does Roaming Throne, as does Annie Joins Up, which is also a removal spell. And then finally, Ojer Attack, which triples the number of tokens that we create. We also have Goblin Bombardment here, which is useful for a number of reasons. It can sacrifice Hazezon immediately so that he leaves without getting rid of all of the tokens that are going to be generated next turn. And it also means that all of those tokens become additional burn damage. We've got pretty straightforward lands, and we want more lands than normal since we want to land ramp as much as possible. So we've got 37 lands. Some attention should be paid to things like Gaia's Cradle. We've got High Market here as just a land that can sack Hazezon. A bunch of basic lands, which are snow for reasons that will become apparent later. But we have a lot of cards that are going to be ramp spells that fetch lands, especially basic lands, so we do need to fill up more of our land slots with basics that we can fetch. We then have some protection spells, so these are ways of making Hazezon mostly uncounterable. We don't really care if Hazezon gets killed, because our plan is to just kill Hazezon off ourselves anyway. So this is mainly just preventing Hazezon from getting countered, although there are exceptions to that, like Steely Resolve. We won't always have a way to sacrifice Hazezon immediately, so we do want additional ways of just making it so that Hazezon doesn't get killed by removal spells. Then we've got a bunch of ramp, especially ramp that orients towards putting additional lands onto the battlefield, so cards like Exploration, Rampant Growth, etc. Then we've got our removal spells. Obviously, Aura Shards is an absolute beating when we put all of the tokens onto the battlefield. Also, it should be noted, Into the North is the reason that we want Snowlands, because this tutors Snowlands. Our ramp is mostly not artifact-based, so Collector Oof can shut off opponents' artifacts without shutting off ours for the most part, although there are obviously exceptions like Skullclamp. Elesh Norn, another trigger doubler for our guy. Then we've got some sweepers. We don't actually have that many creatures that are low, and then we can cast all of these ahead of time, then put all the tokens onto the battlefield. A little bit of tutoring, and especially Evolutionary Leap, which can transform our random 1/1 tokens into bigger things later on in the game that matter more. So obviously Evolutionary Leap might accidentally hit something like Amonadork, but it can also hit some bigger stuff like Craterhoof. And so with that said, that is going to do it for Hazezon Tamar in EDH.